Welcome into the show. It is Daniel Workman coming to you live from the Dream Imaginate Sports Studios. It is Monday morning, 9 a.m. on the East Coast. This is your 6 a.m. West Coast wake up. It is April the 13th. Hope you had a great Easter weekend. For many of us who celebrate this holiday every year, it was a different weekend. Watching online, watching on TV, not being able to get together with family and friends for the weekend was very different than in years past, but it was still a great weekend, and I hope you enjoyed your weekend as well. Last week, some news broke surrounding FIFA and some Fox executives that were indicted. They pled not guilty, and we are going to have Ken Benzinger joining the show here in just a few minutes to dig into some of that. He's the author of the book Red Card, and the book actually covers some of the earlier parts of this whole legal saga that began a few years ago. And we had him on last summer, and we are happy to have him back on again today to dig into some more of this and kind of pick his brain as to where we are in the process, but also, where this could go. So we'll see what his thoughts are coming up here in just a few minutes. Over the weekend, Tariq Panja, a friend of the show, he writes for the New York Times in London. He said, U.S. success puts focus on Swiss failures in FIFA corruption case. Switzerland plans to drop a criminal case against Sepp Blatter, former FIFA president, days after the U.S. revealed more charges in sweeping investigation that has upended global soccer. And so he basically gets into what is going on with FIFA and the Swiss government and why we're not seeing more done over there versus all of these indictments and charges coming from the American counterparts rather than the Swiss. They've continued to fail in their efforts, and a lot of people are looking at this as shall we say, a willful fail, that they're not really trying to track things down, that there's corruption not only at the heart of the global governing body, FIFA, but also at their home country, Switzerland. So it's a story you should check out on the New York Times by Tariq Panja. It was released this weekend, and it is something I'm going to ask Ken about as well. What his interactions in following the Swiss government in their lack of government oversight and investigations into FIFA as well. So we're going to get into that with him coming up just after the break. Also, late last week, there was some news that started kind of percolating through social media, and it caught me by surprise because I had heard that there were, a lot of unhappiness with the U.S. Soccer Development Academy as well as those within the U.S. Soccer Development Academy, and some of that angst had been a direct byproduct of the fact that Major League Soccer had been pushing to create kind of their own tier within the Development Academy. They really didn't want to be mingled, mingled with other development academies. They wanted to stick to themselves in isolation. They didn't want any outside competition. And really that fits their MO. Right? This is Major League Soccer to a T. We create artificial scarcity. We create value for ourselves by having monopolistic control. If they can control the professional ranks by controlling the first division and access to the first division, they can create equity and asset, grow their asset value class for their property. They can do the same thing in the youth space. If they can create for themselves a tier that is on its own, that is unrivaled in terms of competition, in in terms of their ranking, their status within the federation, then that creates more asset value for them, right? This is something that they can lord over others. Well, if you're not in Major League Soccer, then it doesn't count. If you're not in an MLS academy, then it doesn't count. And so they were pushing for this within the Development Academy. An announcement came out months ago that this was going to happen, that Major League Soccer was basically going to create kind of a tier 1 status for themselves. And despite your on-field performance, there were clubs and teams throughout the Development Academy that were going to be essentially relegated to a lower status, to a lower tier, just because they didn't have the 3 initials next to their name, MLS. And so this news came out at the end of last week, going into the weekend, this rumor, and I first saw it from Glenn Crooks, who said that an announcement was coming as early as the next day, so this would have been Friday or Saturday, that the Development Academy was terminated. And not just terminated for this season because of coronavirus, that the whole thing was going to be terminated, shut down. And I was like, wow, this goes beyond what I had heard. And I reached out to some sources, and I got mixed feedback on the validity of the rumor. I got some that were in denial, that said they had not even heard this, and others who said, yes, this is definitely happening. And over the weekend, the rumors kept swirling. Others said that from their sources that there's a vote coming up this week. We don't know, right? U.S. Soccer's not made any public announcements about it, so we don't really know what's going on with this. We don't really know what's about to happen with the U.S. Soccer Development Academy, but here's one thing that I think we need to do in response to this conversation, and that is this. The U.S. Soccer Development Academy has been used so far to create a classist system within the federation in the youth space. It has been used as an official have and have not. And Major League Soccer didn't like the fact that they were having to share the have status. They would rather everyone else be in the have not status so that everyone has to come to them. That is Don Garber's goal. He has stated that every dollar that does not go through Major League Soccer is a dollar lost. He wants to capture everything. That's why they, in Soccer United Marketing, have started trying to infiltrate U.S. youth soccer. And they've tried to create setups where like this tiered system, where they're creating this arbitrary value, what I call false asset value for themselves. It's an arbitrary thing that they've done. It's not based on merit. It's not based on who is actually doing well on the field. It's not even based on who's developing players. When you set up a system like this, a tiered system of haves and have-nots and not based on sporting merit, what you actually do is you incentivize stealing players. You incentivize recruiting players. You actually disincentivize the development of a player. Your priority is just to go out and keep finding the best players, not actually develop the ones you have, because if you have this artificial scarcity creating this propped up fake asset value like monopoly status does for a company, or in this case, a soccer organization, then you're able to then go out into the communities and say, look, if you want to play at the top, you have to come to us. We don't have to develop players. We just go out and steal them. We go out and recruit them. We ask you to come to us. If you want to get into the U.S. youth national team setup, you come through us. You come through us. The Development Academy hasn't been creating world-class players, and neither has Major League Soccer. And in light of that, over the last few years, what Major League Soccer, I think, has come to realize is that in order for us to have a better hold from a marketing and sales pitch, we've got to have fewer people at the table, so that they have to come to us. This isn't good for American soccer. It never has been. But with this supposed announcement coming up on the cancellation, the termination of the Development Academy, it brings to light another interesting aspect of youth soccer in this country. It is entirely too expensive to play, period. And anyone who tells you that it's acceptable for you to be paying thousands of dollars to play youth soccer in your backyard are coming for your pocketbooks. They're not interested in your best interest or in the best interest of your kid. They're looking to make money, period. Now, I understand that programs cost money. And I understand that clubs around the world incentivize development, and those television dollars and other aspects filter through the system and allow clubs to operate so that families don't have to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to play the game. I get it. And that is missing in this country, plain and simple. And I understand that. Pay-to-play soccer will not disappear tomorrow, and it will never entirely go away. After all, when you're in Europe, you still play and pay club fees to do that. The difference is you're not mortgaging your house or having to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to do so. You're spending a fraction of what you do in America. And there's a few reasons why this is. Our classist system is one big piece of this. We've created this fake value, this artificial scarcity model, and we've propped up the likes of Major League Soccer and then later the Development Academy system as a whole. And we've allowed clubs to go into areas and say, look, if you want to play at a real level, you have to come play with us. And oh, by the way, to do that, we've got limited spots. So you're going to have to pay us a lot of money. And not only that, but when you go to a game or go to a weekend or a tournament, you have to stay at this hotel. And it's going to cost you every time we go. You've got to pay for the coaches and you've got to pay a club fee every time we travel. There are all these add-on fees that come in the form of pay-to-play youth soccer. It's a problem. It's a big issue for families around this country. The Federation has not decided to tackle this financial hurdle for families. And if ever there was a time to do it, it's right now. Right now, while everything is shut down, U.S. Soccer should be redesigning the American soccer system. They should be looking at rules and restrictions and guidelines that every organization, every member of them has to follow. That would mean U.S. Club Soccer, U.S. Youth Soccer, AYSO. There are others who say that's just not possible. The Federation can't force them to do so. That's a lie. And someone's lied to you and you've believed a lie. I know this to be true because years ago, Little League Baseball said enough is enough when it comes to pitch counts. And they told every park, every coach, and every team that you cannot pitch players more than certain amounts or you will be in trouble. The Federation could do the same if it actually wanted to lead American soccer into a new way of guiding, governing, and organizing the sport. The problem with the Development Academy is it didn't go far enough. Like many things in the U.S. government, a lot of times there's some really good ideas, but it never actually goes all the way. That, too, is the case here with the Development Academy. Because not everyone was welcomed into the Federation's system of league. This league system was not readily accessible or available to everyone. It further cemented this classist system. What should happen at the youth level is the same thing that should happen at the adult level. Meritocracy, sporting merit, one system of connected leagues. It should be organized around metropolitan markets and population density to reduce travel, to reduce the financial burdens on families, and it should be based on the quality of the teams. If you're a really good team, you should play at a higher level. If you're on the up and coming and you're not quite there, then you're a level or two below. Who cares? Just go play. Instead, we have teams that drive past 2, 3, 4 other clubs and never play those teams. They never play those clubs. We have 14-year-olds getting on airplanes and flying across the country to play one match. That is insane. Completely absurd. And that is an area that the Federation, like Little League Baseball, could put a stop to this kind of treatment of our youth players. Families should not be asked to make that kind of commitment. It is crazy. Crazy to expect a 14, 15-year-old to get on a plane and fly across the country for one match in a league format. I get it. Maybe in the summer there's a national tournament and you won your area of the country and you get put in with 50 other teams or 30 other teams or 12 other teams and you play a week-long tournament. Okay, fine. But that should not be the rule. That should be the exception. Instead, everything is upside down and we're asking families to pay way too much. This news about the Development Academy, it's not really going to solve anything because what happens when it's gone? If they follow through and terminate this thing, what actually happens? Nothing really changes. We're going to have people claiming they are the haves in the ECNL and a higher level of haves in Major League Soccer. And there's going to be everyone else who's vying for their position and stake. And the Federation is going to be washing their hands of their duties to lead all of us into an organized system of connected leagues. Our sponsor this half hour is Ductig Brand, DUKTIG brand.com. And they do a great job of connecting you to on-field ideas. They create these really cool products, and if you haven't checked them out, you should. And do that by going to DUKTIGbrand.com and use the promo code DWShow. You'll get 10% off of your order. Order yourself a notebook. Order yourself a journal or one of their other really cool products. You'll be happy that you did. And it'll get you connected into the game where it really matters, where you can make a difference on the field. It's such an important thing right now to support small businesses, and this is one you can throw your heart behind. DucticBrand.com. Use promo code DWShow. You'll get 10% off of your order. We'll be right back with Ken Bensinger. Welcome back into the show. Thanks for tuning in on this Monday morning. We are pleased and delighted to have joining us again on the show, Ken Benzinger. Ken, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
Doing well. Glad you were able to join us today on the show. We wanted to bring you on to talk about some of the sports news that is taking place, which is primarily off the field right now, with everything being shut down around the world, the crazy times that we live in at the moment. But last week, news broke about some Fox executives being indicted. There was some more news about FIFA and some of the fact that the Swiss investigations have yielded very little, and all of these indictments are still coming from the U.S. perspective. Wanted to just kind of get your thoughts on some of these issues, starting with the Fox executives that were indicted last week as part of this continuing probe. What have you learned so far about these indictments and this kind of new path that the investigation is heading down at the moment?
Yeah, so this was a new indictment that came down in the same old case we've been hearing about for almost 5 years now. So this is what they call a superseding indictment, meaning that it picks up where the last indictment left off and moves the ball a bit forward. So this can be clearly seen as a continuation of that case. Sort of a headline. One of the headlines on it, as you suggest, is these two former Fox executives. Their names are Hernan Lopez and Carlos Martinez, and they were both high-ranking officials within Fox in their international channels, which was primarily focused on Latin America. And Hernan Lopez was the head of that unit, and he reported directly to Rupert Murdoch's son, Lachlan. So a pretty high-ranking guy. Carlos Martinez reported to Lopez, and what the indictment charges is that over a long period of time, years, they were involved in a scheme to pay bribes to South American soccer officials in exchange for the television rights to the Copa Libertadores, which is, for your listeners who probably a lot of them know about it, but those who don't, Libertadores is like the Champions League of South America. So they paid bribes for years and years, according to prosecutors, so that Fox could get rights to those tournaments. And then later on, they also started paying bribes to get Fox the Copa America, which is like the Euros or like equivalent for South America. So that's what they allege in a long period of that. And both those men were charged with wire fraud and with money laundering charges.
And in terms of their pleas, have they, I thought I read the other day where they actually were entering pleas, maybe remotely, technology, video conference or some sort. Did that indeed happen? And what were their pleas so far?
Yeah, so they both pleaded on Thursday. Because of coronavirus, they were allowed to do something which is pretty unusual, which was allowed to make a plea virtually, meaning on teleconference rather than in person. It doesn't happen very often, but in this case, it was permitted, and they both pleaded not guilty. So that's where they stand. Is they both said they're not guilty and intend to fight this.
Now, you brought up Rupert Murdoch's son, and that one of these individuals reported directly to Lachlan, I believe, is the son that you were referring to. In terms of that aspect, is there any indication? Have you seen, or in your research, how high up this in fact went? I mean, obviously we know these two guys were indicted, but is there any indication that this goes all the way to the very top of Fox with the Murdochs themselves? And kind of a follow-up to that, when you answer that, is, have you seen any connections into Fox as it relates to domestic here in the U.S., any of their dealings? Is there any kind of smoke or any kind of indication that stateside individuals within Fox are at risk here of indictments and wrong accusals of wrongdoing as well.
Yeah. So on the first part of the question about Rupert and Lachlan and any of the other Murdochs, their names haven't come up. We haven't seen them named or accused of anything. So I would stop way short of saying that we know that that's in fact happening. I just honestly wouldn't begin to suggest I know anything about that. Obviously we know what the command chain is in that company, and we're thinking about that. We think it's one would logically think or wonder whether they were in on if indeed these bribery schemes are true and provable, how far up the chain to go. And it's not crazy thinking to wonder that, but we haven't to this date seen the evidence directly linking them to that, or to that they were involved in any way other than sort of in the sense of buck stops here and the CEO should know. But your second part of the question, there in fact has been a strong connection now made to what Fox is doing in the U.S. and in the world of soccer. And specifically, the new indictment says that these two fellows, Lopez and Martinez, built connections with powerful South American soccer figures through the bribery scheme. So because they were paying money to them to get the contracts, they built personal relationships with them, and they leveraged those personal relationships that were thanks to bribes to getting other kinds of rights beyond Libertadores and Copa America. And the ones they specifically refer to are the World Cup rights for the 2018 and 2022 World Cups. And as a lot of soccer fans in the States will know, the 2018 World Cup was the first one in years, or in many cycles, that was not on ESPN in the U.S., at least in the English language broadcast, and instead was on Fox. And that was the fruit of Fox getting that for the first time, beating out ESPN. And a bit of a surprise when Fox got it. And now Fox has it for 2022 and now also 2026 as well. So that'll be 3 straight World Cup cycles that Fox has the U.S. English language rights. And according to the indictment, they got those rights thanks to the bribery scheme by Lopez and by Martinez.
So in terms of the bribery scheme and these accusations, what is the likelihood that deal would get nullified or FIFA would be forced to reopen in some kind of open bidding situation for, let's say, 2022 or at the very least 2026, if it is in fact found that this accusation that's part of this indictment, which you would have to think if it's in there, they feel like they've got something that backs that up for them to put that in the formal indictments, the written indictments. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we saw something similar to this in the original indictments, where they basically said that the different groups that were accused at the time had acquired all kinds of rights, including to the Copa America Centenario, which was played in the U.S., and it had been the rights had been acquired through illicit activity, through bribes and that kind of stuff. And yet, despite that, the Centenario happened anyway, and all of it, they did renegotiate the TV rights in that case. So it didn't cancel the tournament. It just led to a renegotiation of the rights, at least partially. But there's some controversy because some of the parties involved in the original indictments in South America are allowed to keep their rights. So it's a little bit all over the place. It's actually a really interesting question about whether, if they could prove that Fox got the rights in a sinister manner, whether that's something that on any level could be, renegotiated or taken back to market, and to what degree the U.S. justice system would want to play a role in that. I don't really know. I think it'll be interesting to watch.
Now, in terms of the domestic side of things here, just kind of continuing to follow the trail from South America northbound back up here into the States. Mm-hmm. What are, if any, has there been any connections either to the United States Soccer Federation, as part of this whole scheme and scandal, and also Soccer United Marketing, their broadcast rights and commercial rights partner, that are obviously heavily involved with Fox, as well as ESPN. Has there been any links so far in any of these indictments, or have you seen anything in particular that might spell some trouble for the Federation or for Soccer United Marketing in regards to, they were heavy involved with Copa America 2016, which you just mentioned, about the previous indictments and scandals. Now here with Fox again, these officials coming out with these indictments coming out against them, and the links reiterated about the World Cup rights as part of this. Have you seen anything there so far that is providing that, even if it's not in the public eye yet, that we may be heading towards individuals within American soccer, or organizations within American soccer that get caught up in this, that goes beyond just Fox and some of their executives?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. A lot of people over the years have wondered to what degree this is going to touch U.S. soccer, and people wondered if it was going to touch Sunil Gulati, and people wondered if it was going to touch his successor. And it hasn't. I mean, as far as we know, to this date, it hasn't. There's a lot of questions about whether someone like Gulati might have, at least to some degree, helped the prosecution. We don't really know. We know that Gulati was very close to Chuck Blazer. We don't really know what that means. I mean, one would think that if there was dirt on him, Blazer would have had to tell it, and yet we haven't seen him charged. And we've never seen any indications that, we've never seen evidence that any of the contracts that Soccer United Marketing has struck were incorporated or questioned in this case. So I don't know if what it means is that the prosecutors are giving the U.S. Soccer Federation a free pass, or that they did look into it, they didn't find evidence, or what. We know that that there was some funny business with Chuck Blazer at CONCACAF that happened before Soccer United Marketing was created, and Soccer United Marketing wants to give us the impression that they don't do the same kind of dirty business that those people did. And we certainly have seen a lot of smoke, but to this date, the case hasn't shown fire on that. And I think we may have to wait longer to find out.
So in terms of, looking at cases like this, and just want to go to the land of hypothetical for just a moment, as someone who would be investigating and researching, this certainly does not seem to be just a sequential linear process, that it's more of a spider web of, tracking down leads, and this lead leads to another lead. And, I've never, worked in any kind of criminal investigation, but I've watched enough TV shows to see the board, right? And then we start drawing lines out from a picture on a board, and who is this person connected to, et cetera, et cetera. And you see that with the mob, and you see that with other, type of conspiracies and other things. So in this kind of investigation that has been going and ongoing for years, and certainly these latest indictments don't seem to close the book on this investigation. It just seems to be the next in the series of events. At what point, from a hypothetical standpoint, could you, looking at what we know about FIFA and CONCACAF, and the individuals involved in the different federations and confederations that they've been associated with or accused of wrong dealings with, is it logical to think and assume that U.S. soccer is either like completely just under a rock, or somebody either directly or through intermediaries has to be involved in this somehow from a hypothetical standpoint. If you were to look at this just, if you were kind of writing this as like a movie or a TV show, would it not be an easy conclusion to go that somebody somewhere knew something and it goes beyond just what we know so far? Would that be a safe assumption at this point? Obviously not naming any names or pointing any specific fingers, because we don't know what we don't know yet, but does it not leave more questions to be answered?
I mean, these questions be answered, but that I think works on the baseline assumption that something that foul play did happen at the Federation or at Saucony Data Marketing, and the only question is whether they were ever properly caught or not. And I just don't know whether we can say that. I don't know what we can say whether there absolutely was foul play at the Federation or not. We might think that, but the way you're asking the question is sort of saying, well, it was there. The only question is, will it ever come out in the case? And the answer I would say is, I've certainly heard of many, many people believe that is a organization that behaves in a way that might be seen as corrupted, but I haven't seen ever anything beyond innuendo. I've never seen actual proof that that's the case, as opposed to what people believe. I've seen, don't get me wrong, I spent a lot of time looking into this, and I think there is some clear, for example, the way that the Federation and Saucony Data Marketing coexist, and the way that the board is composed and all that. There's some clear, apparent conflicts of interest. There were some conflicts in the past that I think, one could reasonably question whether it violated rules regarding nonprofits, and whether there was a proper arm's length distance, But I don't know if any of that rises to the criminal level, which, would need to involve things that violate codes of conduct and violate fraud laws and that kind of stuff. And that's a real question if it jumps from questionable behavior, it might be on a civil level questionable, to things that appear to be criminal. And I just haven't seen the evidence. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I haven't seen it. And if the prosecutors or the investigators have it, they've never let anyone see it.
Yeah, I mean, I like you have heard a lot of innuendo behind the scenes, a lot of assumptions behind the scenes, and it goes beyond, what we know, like specifically with Chuck Blazer, other individuals who there have been, this assumption that immunity deals have been involved as part of this investigation in order to really get some of this going in the first place. That included, Sepp Blatter, etc., which leads me to this other point about FIFA and the Swiss government has continually failed to, from all appearances, to do their duties in terms of investigating FIFA. It seems as though it too is corrupt when it comes to these investigations and looking in to things. And news came out over the weekend about them dropping, I believe, the case with Sepp Blatter from a Swiss perspective. What have you seen in this whole, litany of investigations and indictments? They're all coming stateside. They're not coming from FIFA's home country. And what have you, in your investigations and research in the past, what have you seen in regards to that relationship between FIFA and the Swiss government?
Yeah, and I think that's the area where I feel a little more confident in saying and supporting what you're saying, which is that it's like a downright fiasco how the Swiss have handled all this. I think that this latest thing, dropping the charges against or the investigation against Blatter, now we're down to one thing, but they dropped one of the two they're looking at, is very indicative of the way that they've behaved for a long time. I mean, I want to be clear. We don't know if Blatter did bad things or not. We certainly have our reasons to suspect it, but we haven't seen any evidence. What we do know is the Swiss have been working this 4.5 years now, coming on 5 years, and made a lot of noise about it and delivered nothing. And, if they they could have been a lot more quiet about it or a lot more efficient about it if all they were going to get to was nothing. That shows us, and along the way, there was many issues that came up that also cast a lot of doubt on what they're doing. You had one of the investigators in the case was removed from the case because he had some conflicts of interest, and he was kicked out of the case. And then you had the Attorney General of Switzerland, who it turned out was having secret meetings with Gianni Infantino to ostensibly to discuss the case, which is totally not allowed. And he got rebuked for that and had to recuse himself from the case, and also was docked like 8% of his pay. His pay was reduced to 8%, sort of as a punishment for that misbehavior. And you start seeing things like that, and you think, what is going on with this investigation? And when they end up dropping the charges, you really think the whole thing smells like a rat. And you also think back to past investigations that Swiss judicial authorities have done against FIFA, and how disappointing they've been. And probably the most famous is the investigation of ISL, International Sport and Leisure, which had for many years controlled the major rights that FIFA had in the world for the World Cup and other major events. And it was pretty much documented in that case that Avalanche, the former FIFA president, and his son-in-law, Ricardo Teixeira, had taken huge bribes, gigantic bribes, and there was documented evidence of it. The prosecutors showed it, and instead of actually bringing charges against either of them, it let them pay a small fine that represented just a fraction of all the bribes they took, and let them go away scot-free. So there's a pretty long tradition, getting back almost 20 years now, of Swiss prosecutors doing as little as possible to really crack down on FIFA.
So you bring up an interesting point here about the discussions of FIFA and the Swiss government, and you brought up Infantino's name, who is the current president of FIFA. A few weeks ago, there was an article by Philippe Auclair talking about Infantino's revenge. And it was about the whole situation with setting up a normalization committee in Trinidad and Tobago. Looking at FIFA now, I mean, obviously we can go back and look at bribes and other things of the past, but Infantino is in charge right now. He is president of FIFA at the moment. What have you observed in looking into him and FIFA as they continue to, at least, publicly will say at times we're trying to clean things up. Whether we believe that or not is a different story. But what have you seen in terms of Infantino and how he is conducting business at FIFA at the moment? Have you had any reason to be alarmed? Are there questions that need to be answered? What are your thoughts on his leadership at the moment and his leadership of FIFA, and some of these ongoing investigations and scenarios, like you mentioning him speaking with the Swiss government about the FIFA case? What are you seeing in regards to Infantino and his involvement in leadership with FIFA?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he came in talking a big game about wanting reform, and that he was going to bring reform to the thing and clean it all up, to FIFA and to world football, world soccer. And it really looks a little bit like this kind of standard campaign buster we see. I don't think he's particularly interested, has shown particular interest in rooting out the corruption. If anything, what he wants is to have as little outside interference and oversight as possible. He was accused early on a few times of some potential ethical breaches of in his job, and mostly got away from it. But we learned also that that the ethics committee didn't have the kind of independence that it had, that it should have, or even as much as it had in the past. That the person he brought in to run the ethics committee seemed compromised in a lot of ways, and so even though he was exonerated according to FIFA, there was certainly real questions about about how clean that whole investigation was. And when problems have erupted around the world, he tends to have taken a heavy-handed approach and also a particularly non-transparent approach. There was a lot of noise in Africa earlier this year and the end of last year, and he sent in the Secretary General to clean things up, which a lot of people in Africa said was not within his right to do, that he basically sort of in an authoritarian way took over African soccer and sent a Secretary General, which wasn't her job, to do that anyway. And people didn't see much evidence that much was cleaned up. But 6 months later, I don't remember how many months, she announced that sort of mission accomplished and everything was clean now, which everyone thought was hilarious. So that reminds me of the good old or the bad old days of FIFA when everything was just another one whitewash job after another, to clean things up and make people stop paying attention to them. So I mean, I don't, I would love to hear someone to convince me otherwise, but what I see is sort of business as usual.
Speaking of business as usual, we've talked about Chuck Blazer and CONCACAF, and just for the audience, if you're not fully aware of how world governance works in the game of soccer, FIFA governs the world. And then each kind of continental or somewhat continental federation governs its own affairs. So CONCACAF, for us, has North America, Central America, the Caribbean, South America's CONMEBOL, obviously UEFA covers Europe and so on and so forth. When we look at the governance at the world level with FIFA, the confederation level at CONCACAF, CONMEBOL, UEFA, etc., and then down into the national federations. We know Australia's had its issues of recent in terms of promotion relegation, and FIFA's been kind of involved in that on some level, trying to work with the Australian Federation. I just mentioned the article from just a couple weeks ago referring to the Normalization Committee for Trinidad and Tobago. They've been involved with Argentina. They've been involved recently, FIFA sending in, as you mentioned, into Africa with that confederation, the African Confederation. Looking at where these organizations are, it seems to me, and knowing what I know of how the federation, the U.S. Soccer Federation, operates at the board level, and the conflicts of interest that are there, the operations and decisions and how they are made. For example, over the weekend, news started coming out on social media that that U.S. Soccer was about to terminate the U.S. Soccer Development Academy program, and there were quite a few people within the federation that were surprised by this rumor, but yet it abounded, and it seems that that's coming up for a vote sometime this week, possibly, in terms of the termination vote. How important, how critical is it for us in terms of the game on a global level, looking at governance, to get transparency as well as oversight and accountability implemented at FIFA, at the confederation levels, and down into the national federation levels, in order to once and for all truly clean up the sport? Because it just doesn't seem like federation, confederation, or the World Federation in FIFA at any of these levels that we are seeing true transparency, accountability, and oversight that gives anyone confidence that things are actually being cleaned up at the moment.
Well, yeah, and I think this is an evidence sort of the hole that FIFA has dug for itself here, right? FIFA, 3 or 4 decades of bad faith will have succeed in totally destroying anyone's belief in anything you say, right? And so a place like FIFA might, in fact, let's suppose they had cleaned up their act, right? Like, who would believe them at this point? Who would believe what they say? They've kind of ruined their credibility. And I don't know how they earn that public trust again. So, and U.S. Soccer, is clearly part of that problem. We just see their behavior and some of the stuff that's happened with the way that the ministers of Cordero and other of U.S. Soccer were actively attacking and sort of besmirching the name of the women's team in an attempt to win a lawsuit without thinking about what they were doing. It was like shooting themselves in the foot, I thought. And it was another example of the ways that they didn't listen to their constituency and were not interested in being in an open public discourse, but continue with this sort of imperious attitude of they're on top and everyone else has to do what they say and not question them. And I think that attitude is one that people in that world sort of learned, I think, from the people on top. It's very disheartening. It's a group of people who just don't believe that anyone can tell them what to do.
It is disheartening and completely, in my view, unnecessary. Unless this is the big caveat: you don't want transparency, you don't want oversight, you don't want accountability, unless you're doing things you don't want people to know about. I mean,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're doing stuff that's proper and in the light, why should you care? This is, I don't like the idea of a government having, the ability to surveil all aspects of your life.
Yeah.
The flip side of that for me is, although I don't like it, at the same time, I also feel like if I'm not running around doing improper things or illegal things, I shouldn't have anything to worry about, even though I don't like it and don't want it. The oversight and accountability when it comes to soccer and it comes to the federation, confederation, and obviously up to FIFA with the world governing body, it seems as though whenever you have the real conversation about accountability, about oversight, transparency, that is the area where they seem to fight the most. They would almost rather pay you or settle something or give you something to make you go away than to force them to do all of their dealings in the light.
Yeah.
And to me that's disturbing. It's frustrating, especially from an American perspective, where I think American soccer could be the greatest soccer country on earth with our sports economy and all of the advantages that we could have if we chose to harness those. But it just seems like right now the status quo in the kind of interwoven relationship, it's more like almost like a cartel at the top of U.S. soccer. And although they may switch a name out here or there, like with Carlos Cordero resigning, you brought him up resigning over this U.S. women's national team case, he's still on the board as past president of U.S. soccer, right? Like, right. He didn't actually go anywhere. Now, does he have the power he had a month ago? No, because he's not the acting president, but he is still there. He is able to go into any boardroom. They did not ban him. They did not vote him out or sanction him from a ethics standpoint or any of those things that would disqualify him from serving as past president. So he is still allowed in the boardrooms, still allowed to be a part of the process, and until I hear different, he is still chair of World Cup 2026 organizing committee. Now, that may have changed, and an announcement may be forthcoming, but a month later, I still have not received any updates as to whether that's actually changed or not, which is a powerful and also personally beneficial position to be in, head of the 2026 World Cup organizing committee. So, looking at U.S. soccer and people go, well, we changed and now we have our first female president. She's been on the board and around the board for a very long time. And she's not an outsider in Cindy Parlow-Cone. And Carlos Cordero is still sitting there. The only person that officially rotated off of the board, but is still going to be involved in conversations and probably attending a lot of board meetings no matter what is going to be Sunil Gulati, because he's still on the exco with FIFA. So, he's not going anywhere. So what really did change a month ago other than a PR strategy? What did we see?
Yeah.
So for me, it's frustrating.
Like PR. I feel like the PR thing is something you're hitting the nail on the head there. I mean, FIFA's response has always been, and U.S. Soccer maybe taking a page from that, is to find the most expedient PR solution to these problems, but not really resolve them. Right? It's not, the point is not to resolve the problem. The point is to sort of get the public eye off their back. And as you say, if someone gets pushed out of the job, but it's still there, then what's going on? You should either kick them all the way out or keep them where they are, you would think. So what these half steps don't make sense, except for to be able to say to the public, look, he's not our president anymore.
Right. And not only that, the other thing that is disturbing about that whole incident is that board members and members of the Athlete Council all came out talking about how they had no idea that this was the language, and they tried to paint it like Carlos was the only person that knew. What are you doing on the board if you don't know the strategy of the federation in your highest profile legal challenge? What are you doing to provide oversight to the federation? Number one. And number two, not only did the musical chair PR stunt take place, they also, put Lydia Walke, the chief legal officer for the federation, on administrative leave pending an investigation. There's not been any announcement that I've seen so far on whether she is going to keep her job or be dismissed. I mean, looking at the federation, zooming in here on the U.S. versus FIFA and CONCACAF and the rest of the world, it seems like the same stuff that's happening over in Switzerland is happening right here, and we're still nowhere near getting to a place of transparency, accountability, and oversight. In looking at the cases and the indictments that's come out, obviously, things are nefarious, have been taking place at least enough of a level for the U.S. government to feel confident in some indictments. And I just would love to see that investigation continue. And I would love to see, changes happen from a governance standpoint. The problem I see is that, you start looking to how that can happen, and you've got, some heavy hitters within Major League Soccer that have a lot of power, the Bob Krafts of the world, who wield a lot of influence and sway over the federation. And you look at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and you've got a former Wasserman Media Group executive who is heading up the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. You've got a former Wasserman executive who is now the CEO of U.S. Soccer. Wasserman Media Group is heading up the Olympics 2028 in Los Angeles. You just look at these things and you're like, I mean, at what point do we all just go like, this isn't working and they're not going to fix themselves?
Right.
So
yeah, it starts to feel like the whole thing starts to look like an inside job, right? It starts to feel like there's a small group of people who get everything and control everything, and who's being served by this, right?
Completely.
And, yeah. And I wish I could tell you I had an answer to that question. I don't, though. I mean, I think that the criminal case we've been talking about has been incredibly important for the sport. And also we've kind of learned that apparently no other law enforcement agency in the world seems prepared to do anything like that. But I'm not totally convinced that we can rely on them to take care of every problem in the sport. I just don't think that's likely. I think that the prosecution has shown that it took a really big swing early on and has taken relatively smaller swings since then. They've been picking them, their shots pretty carefully. And I don't know. We haven't seen a lot of indications that they're going to go root out all the problems in U.S. soccer, for example. And if it happens, I think there's a lot of people who welcome it. But I'm not holding my breath. I just think that they have their limitations of what they're going to do. And I don't, unless someone's seen something I haven't seen proof that they're going after the Federation.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely frustrating. Just because I look at it from a potential perspective. I just think there's so much more we could be as a soccer country if we cleaned up our act and really, changed this kind of insider trading type of culture at the top of the Federation and really opened it up. And like I said, do all the decision making and the processes out in the public. Transparency, accountability, oversight. To me, it's just so necessary to do that and clean that up. So hopefully it'll happen somehow. But like you, I don't anticipate the U.S. government stepping in through their investigations to clean everything up. So I'll take whatever they do.
Look, exactly. I'll take whatever they do too. I think that we start to get wishful thinking and we think they'll solve every problem, but either for lack of evidence or for lack of interest or whatever the case may be, I haven't seen strong evidence that they're going to go after our home team, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Ken, thanks for coming on the show. How can people connect with you, follow your work?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. Ken Bensinger is my handle. Pretty simple. With everyone stuck in their houses right now, it's a great opportunity to pick up a book that I wrote called Red Card, which is a pretty in-depth explanation of how this case began and how it got to all the way to the trial stage in 2017. So I think I'm obviously self-promotional here, but I really recommend you pick up Red Card, take a look. I think once you read it, all this stuff will make a lot more sense, and we all have a lot more free time in our hands. So pick it up if you can.
Absolutely. I co-sign that, and I can't wait for the sequel. Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Take care. Stay safe.
You too. That is Ken Bensinger. We will be right back after this.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. Or you could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Thanks for watching the show. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, we appreciate it. Hope you had a great Easter weekend. Big thanks to Ken Bensinger for joining us as always. We'll see you again tomorrow.